Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. And my guest today is Abby Glassenberg, the president of Craft Industry Alliance.
Hi.
Welcome to my
Yeah,
channel. And it must be a funny feeling because you usually interview people on your podcast.
I do. Yes, I've had a podcast for, I think, over 8 years now. So yes, I am usually on the other side.
Well, let's backpedal a little bit. Let's start talking about how, I know that your first major purchase happened with your bar mitzvah money.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, I was always a crafty kid growing up, and always liked to make things, origami, polymer clay, all that sort of thing. But we didn't have a sewing machine in my house. My mom didn't sew. My grandmother didn't sew. But I took sewing in home ec in eighth grade. And I was terrible at it. I just did not have attention to detail at that age. And we made a pair of Bermuda shorts and all the seams were crooked and terrible. But I could see that there was potential. What I liked about it was that you could make something useful that you could actually wear or do something with.
Right.
I always really liked sort of craft over art because I liked being able to make something that you could use. And I saw that sewing could do that. So I had my bat mitzvah in 1988, and I used some of the money that I got as gifts to buy a Burnett, which was a really basic sewing machine, the kind of sewing machine you have in home ec.
Right.
Very sturdy, very basic.
Do you still have it?
Well, okay. So first of all, I didn't really know how to use it very well. And the thing with sewing machines is that, if something goes wrong and you don't have somebody there to say, oh, you wound the bobbin incorrectly, you put it in upside down or something, it can be difficult to troubleshoot. And so I didn't really know how to use it for a long time. But I brought it with me all over the place. I brought it with me for many years. I had it for, I think, 23 years. And then when we moved to our current house, it got bumped in the move and it broke. But I then went out and bought a new sewing machine.
It had a good and happy life.
But it had a very long and happy life. And I did start my business with it. So
when you think back into your home economics class, and you said that you were horrible at it, do you think we are very critical of ourselves? Do you think you were really that bad, or we are perfectionists and we want to see immediate results?
Good question. I'm not a perfectionist. So that's one thing about me. I think I was truly terrible at it because when I was that age, I was always in a rush. And actually, it's one of the things I really like about sewing is you really can't rush, because if you rush, you will sew something upside down. You'll sew, you'll attach the sleeve to the wrong side or whatever and have to unpick it. So you have to slow down. And for me, that's really positive. So I do think I was probably in a massive rush and also just did not have, as I said, attention to detail at that age, which I sort of have come to have over many years of getting older and more mature. So, yeah.
Right. Well, do you remember some of the first, besides the Bermuda shorts, some of the first experiments that you did outside of the home economics class?
Yeah, I took some classes at G Street Fabrics in DC, which is a wonderful fabric store that's still there. And we made a vest. I know I still have that vest somewhere. And then I used to make scrunchies. Scrunchies were, it was the 80s. So everybody's wearing scrunchies, and my friends and I would make them and then sell them at school. So kind of little burgeoning entrepreneurs who would make lots of scrunchies. And that was primarily what I made. I did try to make some dolls. I had a book about doll making. And I remember staring at it and reading it over and over again and trying to make them, but not super successfully. So I had a doll. It was kind of a monster that my grandmother made that I had in my room for some reason. And I used to love. So, I had, I think, in my mind that I wanted to be able to do those things, but I didn't have the skills or help or anything to be able to do them at that time.
Which is ironic. So if my viewers don't know, you started your business basically selling those sewed dolls, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when I had my first child, I was home with her, and then I would go to story time at the library. And afterward, we would go and, look at books. And I started checking out these doll making books most of them were from the late 60s, early 70s. You can imagine what they look like. Lots of clowns. They were really into clowns at the time for some reason. Anyway, so I bring them home and then try to teach myself. So while she was napping, I would try to teach myself how to kind of sew the things I wanted to make. And that was right at the beginning of craft blogs. So it was really helpful because there were people who were making dolls and making stuffed animals, and I could finally get that help and ask questions and learn. And so I did improve and actually learn how to sew the things that I really wanted to do. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've heard, and it sort of caught my attention, that you were one of the first craft bloggers, among the beginning of the popularity of blogging in crafts. And also that you were one of the few people, first people on Etsy. Do you feel like before you started business side, were you also on the front pages of all the technological advances?
Oh, no, definitely not. I'm not an early adopter at all. And in fact, my husband always laughs at me because he bought me an iPod when iPods came out. And I was really disappointed in the gift and was really mad at him. And I was like, why did you buy this for me? I don't even want this. And then a few years later started a podcast and whatever. So he's always laughing at me because I was totally rejecting technology. No, I was never somebody who made websites for other people or anything like that. My craft blog was on TypePad and I had no idea how to use it. I mean, I had to actually really learn from the beginning. And one of the things I loved about Etsy in those early days is that you could sell things online without knowing how to code. I mean, that was really what Etsy gave us in those early days. And I had no idea how to code or anything like that. So for me, Etsy was a great solution at that time.
Do you remember that first sale on Etsy?
Oh yeah, totally. Yes, I remember the first comment on the blog too, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was really exciting in those early days that, somebody you didn't know would be able to read what you wrote or buy what you made. And I took part in a challenge on Flickr. And it was like a sewing a stuffed animal challenge. Mm-hmm. And the person who organized it lived in Australia. And so she explained the rules. And every month she'd give you a prompt, you'd make something, take a picture, post in Flickr. That was it, But in the beginning, I thought you had to mail it to her in Australia. Object. Yeah. How would she? Right. Exactly. I really had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, does it feel strange when people you don't know, you're sitting home, you're crafting, and then somebody else feels like they know you from your blog, from your podcast now? Does it feel bizarre?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in no way am I a well-known person, but in certain tiny little circles, okay, sure. Some people know who I am. And so I did have a weird experience. I mean, it's not weird, but it's eerie, at QuiltCon. I went to QuiltCon, which is a big show for Modern Quilt Guild in Savannah. And I was just standing around talking to somebody, and someone behind me called my name and they heard my voice and knew my voice from my podcast. That was weird, right? That is not normal for me. That was just in that specialized environment, this one person.
It's not even this thing where people can see us.
Right.
It's just by voice recognition.
Yeah. That was kind of interesting. So so it's nice though. I mean, I write a newsletter every week and I've written it every week since 2013. And it's really nice when I go to shows and people say, oh, I love your newsletter, because I wrote it last night. It went out this morning. It always goes out on Wednesdays. And, there are days like Tuesday night, I'm up until 11 trying to finish it. And it is very gratifying when somebody says it means something to me to receive it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, it is interesting because as you said, I work alone. I'm in my house sitting on my couch. And it is funny too. Sometimes people think that my company is large. And so they'll email me and be like, oh, maybe you can contact your tech team about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like,
going tech.
And who would that be?
Well, let's backpedal a little bit. Let's talk about your Etsy business, because that was like the beginning of you treating your hobby as a business, right?
It was. I mean, for a long time, I didn't make any money, really. I was selling finished stuffed animals that I would make. And they just covered the cost of fabric and time. I mean, it really didn't make any money at all. It kind of turned a little bit when I started making birds. So I went through this long period of time where I made soft sculpture birds. And I made like 1 million of them. And I had a show at our local library. Then I had some shows at different galleries. I had one in Atlanta that I actually went to and installed and stuff like that. And when I made the birds, they sold for a higher price, which was nice because they were more like a sculpture. And then that led to a book called The Artful Bird, which I wrote and came out with Interweave in 2011. And so when I did that, I sort of started making patterns for birds. And when that book came out, I had a kind of different feeling. I was like, oh, this is actually something. This is a business. I'm an author. I had like a book signing and things like that. I went to the New York Public Library and did like a crafternoon, and there were 200 people there. It just felt different.
Right.
And then I wrote a second book that was about how to design your own stuffed animal sewing patterns. And that actually was my first book idea, but for various reasons, it came out second. And then when that book came out, I started to, I took all the finished stuffed animals out of my Etsy shop and refilled it with patterns. And that's when I actually had a business that made money, made a profit above and beyond what I was putting into it. So that it took many years. That's from 2005 to 2013, by the way, when it was really just developing.
Well, when you talk about your books, and you mentioned that the second book was actually the first idea, tell me a little bit more about that story. Like, why didn't the second book didn't become the first?
Right. Yeah, no, good question. So I had the idea to create a book about stuffed animals and how to sew stuffed animals, because I would go to, as I said, the library and then later Barnes and Noble, and I would look for this book.
Right.
And I was like, I just want a book that's going to show you how to get all these different shapes, how to attach horns, how to put on, different kinds of claws. Like, I just want a book that's going to show me this. And I could never find it. There was one book, but it was published in the mid 60s before there were any real photos in books and any color photos in books that are craft books. So it just wasn't, and I mean, I read the whole book and it was very useful, but it wasn't the kind of modern day craft book that you're looking for. So I was frustrated that I couldn't find it. And I was like, I should write it. This is the book that I should write. Once I had the idea, I was like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to take this idea. It's such a good idea. Like I was really like, shh, don't tell anyone. And so I wrote a book proposal. I Googled how to write a book proposal, went to the bookstore and found out who all the publishers were, found whatever. I did all the research, wrote a book proposal that was so overly complicated. Like, I think, and I often do this in my mind, it's got to be this huge thing. Like, so in order for it to be good, it's got to be incredibly
encyclopedia.
Ridiculous, like just ridiculous.
Right.
So I wrote this ridiculous proposal and I sent it out to all these publishers. I sent it to 7 publishers.
Okay.
5 of them got back to me. So I was like, oh, interesting. And I got on the phone with the acquisitions editor at Interweave, who was Trisha Waddell at that time. And she's amazing. And she was like, I like the idea, but it's complicated.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I know. And she's like, well, how you just do a book of the birds? And I was like, oh, that would be like so easy.
Right.
So I was like, okay, interesting. And got off the phone. And in like 10 minutes, I had a table of contents. Like, it was ready to rumble. And I sent it back to her and she's like, yeah, that's what we're going to do, the book of the birds. So that's how come the Artful Bird came first. And it was actually really a great thing to have it go in that order, because once I published that book, I was like, oh, I see. Like,
so you knew everything.
Yeah, I had gone through the whole process, and Interweave was a great partner at that time. And I realized what it was I wanted, like for example, Artful Bird, the patterns in the back, they're not full size.
Mm-hmm.
You have to enlarge them on a photocopier. And that's a really poor user experience. So when I went to write stuffed animals, I like negotiated hard. We have to have full size patterns, but in order to do that, you have to overlap them the way that Japanese sewing pattern books are, where you have a template and you have another template on top,
Mm-hmm.
and the one on top is red and the one below is black. And as a user, you just have to decide which one you're tracing, and you just put your paper. It's not that hard once you understand how to use it. And they wanted to instead have a CD of the patterns. And I was like, absolutely not. CDs are going to be gone in a year. Like nobody's going to even have a CD drive.
Yeah.
And so I was like, put the patterns for free online. And that was also a big thing. It was like free. Well, I was like, put the patterns for free online, and the book will have all the instructions.
Right.
And in the back, the overlapping, but people can print it online. So I knew how to negotiate for what was going to make it good. And actually Interweave rejected the idea. So I had first right of refusal with them. And I went back and was like, hey, now I'm ready. I'm going to write the stuffed animals book. And they were like, we're not interested. We'll take what they wanted was another book like the bird book, but of sea creatures. And I was like, no, that's not what's happening. So it's great. They let me out, and then I just shopped it around, and I ended up at Sterling, which no longer exists, but had a wonderful editor and knew what I was doing. So in the end, it was a blessing.
Well, I recently interviewed Carrie Lord. She's the owner of Tuft in UK, and it's a crochet company. But interestingly enough, like she had similar idea to yours in terms of collections. Like she wanted to create one body that you can then transfer different animals using the same body. And you did sort of similar thing with your animals, right? When you had similar features, but different animals coming out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to go, and I've done, like, I have a doll that you can make into a boy doll. You can make it into a girl doll. I'm actually sewing one right now that's going to be all made from denim. So it's going to be an entirely denim doll. Back in like the 70s, I think Levi Strauss company came out with this denim doll. And there's really not been a ton of denim dolls since then. So I'm like, let's just see what happens. Right. She's very blue. But I still think it's cool. But yeah, you can, I love the idea of doing something where it's a basic body and then you put long ears, short ears, all different kinds of snouts, whatever, to make it into a customizable animal. That's super cool.
Well, you started with Etsy and your blog, and then you decided that that wasn't enough and you wanted to go into podcasts and interview other people, other makers. Tell me how the idea of podcast was born.
Well, what happened was when I started writing books, so I wrote those 2 books, I just started talking to other people who had also written craft books. And it turned out that not everybody's contract was the same. Not everybody's royalties were the same. Not everybody had ebook rights in the same way. All kinds of stuff. Not everybody got an advance. And it felt like nobody was talking about it. Like there wasn't enough information to be able to make a good decision. Right. And I didn't go to business school. I don't have a law degree. I was a middle school teacher. So I was like, I don't know about this. So I just started talking to people. And then because I had this blog and newsletter that kind of went with it, I would just write articles explaining what I learned from talking to people. And so the blog started to pivot for many years prior to then. It was really DIY tutorials, it was like how to make daffodils out of felt. Like that was what it was. And then it became, well, what is a book advance? Like that would be, so, and I had a couple of people who were like, I miss the old blog. And I was like, well, I have to be able to change. Like if I can't change, the blog is going to go away. So I was like, it's okay if you can unsubscribe. It's completely fine. So I started to write more and more about the business side of craft. And I was like, oh, there's a trade show. What is that? Like really kind of getting into that. And just to be able to learn about that, you had to call people and ask them questions. And so I started sort of doing that slowly. And I was also really interested in Etsy. Etsy had changed a lot and I was still an Etsy seller. So I could like see all those changes. And the Etsy community had a lot of strong feelings about the changes. And so in 2013, Etsy made this pretty radical decision to say you can have production partners. And what that really meant was a big, sort of redefining of handmade.
Right.
So they did like it was a town hall meeting. It was video town hall meeting. It's kind of ahead of its time. And I watched it live. And then I wrote an article like, here's what they said. Here's what a production partner is. Here's what I think about that. And so somebody from Etsy contacted me and was like, oh, we read your article and we'd love to talk to you further about it. And I was like, I don't really need to talk to Etsy about this stuff. But I was like, I said to my husband, if I can record this conversation and they let me put the recording online, then I'll do it. Because then everybody can hear what they're saying and what I'm asking. And I was like, she's absolutely going to say no, because why would she say yes to that? So, but I don't need it anyway. So if she says no, I'm going to say no anyway. So who cares? So I asked and she was like, sure. And I was like, oh, so I had to figure out all the equipment and everything to make that happen. And I recorded the conversation and put it up. And that was like a podcast. I had, just the Mac, like, a microphone and no music. But that was with Vanessa Pertozzi, who was at Etsy at that time. And it was great. And people loved it. It got downloaded a lot. And I was like, oh, that was super interesting. Like, let's do another one. So that fall, I started doing a few. And I was like, this is great, because a podcast, as you know, gives you an excuse to call up everybody interesting you've ever wanted to talk to and talk to them.
That's my favorite part. That's why you're here.
It's like the best thing ever if you're somebody who's nosy like me. So I was like, okay, I really do want to do this. Let me figure it out. So I still didn't invest in all the equipment quite yet. But I was like, okay, let's make a schedule. So the January, I think, of 2014, I was like, it's going to go up the first and third Monday of the month. I knew I couldn't do weekly because I had 3 little kids. And I was like, it'll go away. I have to come up with something sustainable. I was like, I can handle that. I didn't really edit it. I was very like very low key in the beginning, but I've been publishing an episode the first and third Monday of the month since then. And it's been really, really great because I've learned a ton and I've met a ton of fabulous people through it. And I will say a podcast seems easy, but as you know, it's actually a lot of work. And there are times when I'm like, oh gosh, I just don't feel like doing this. But I think perseverance is perhaps like really the trick toward succeeding at anything, because I think just pushing through and making myself do it when I didn't really want to has been the trick. Yeah.
Well, I also think the fact that you allowed yourself to talk about what you felt like talking about and not what pleases the audience necessarily.
Right.
Like that freedom also helps. Like I know it helps me a lot because sometimes I feel like talking to other people and sometimes I feel like talking about what I'm making and something that I learn and something that I find interesting. So that freedom of like, it's my channel and it cannot please every single person.
That's right.
And
you're going to get feedback sometimes where people don't like it. They don't, for whatever reason. I do think having a thick skin is really helpful. I was a middle school teacher, as I said before, and being a middle school teacher gets you a very thick skin. If anyone's ever dealt with middle schoolers, and that was very helpful to me. We used to say when I was in ed school and in Teach for America, like, you just have to be a turtle and let it roll off your back. And those years of being a turtle were helpful.
Right. Well, let's talk about Craft Industry Alliance. How was that idea born?
Yeah. So as I said, I've been doing a lot of business writing on the blog. I had the podcast, and one of my podcast guests was Kristen Link, who had a very popular blog called So Mama So. It was a contributor blog, and I contributed patterns to it in the past. And she would, tons of people she had over 1 million page views a month. It was a really big blog. And so I had her on the podcast as a guest. And then at the same moment, this was like 2014, I was like, maybe you could turn the newsletter into a paid product that would serve the industry, like the craft industry. There was, Substack. This was before Substack. There was like no real easy way to get people to pay for a MailChimp newsletter. But I was looking at it. I'd written up like a terms of service and I'd contacted a lawyer. I was like working on it. And she called me and was like, would you like to start a craft business conference with me? And as I said, I had 3 little kids. One of my kids has special needs. And I was like, I can't go to a conference, much less start a conference. Like I have to be at home. I can't go anywhere. So I was like, no, but like, let's talk. I'm thinking of doing this thing with the newsletter. So I told her about that. And we started talking and came up with this idea, like maybe we could create a trade association that would be completely different from the existing trade associations in that it wouldn't have a show. It wouldn't be about a show because the existing trade associations at that time were really about the trade show. And when you joined, what you got was a ticket to the show. And so we were like, we won't do that, but we'll do all the other stuff that you can do, sort of, provide education and networking and news coverage and all of that. So that was the idea. And we spent 10 months building a website. And then we launched in October of 2015. So, it was interesting. And I kept my blog going for quite a long time after that. But yeah, that's where it came from.
Well, who is the perfect person to be a member of Craft Industry Alliance?
Oh, it's really a broad spectrum, which is a big challenge. So a great person to join can be anything from an Etsy shop owner who, is doing this crafting as a side hustle while they have a full-time job and are hoping at some point to grow it. I mean, that's one kind of person, but it's also a brick and mortar local yarn shop owner who's looking for new ideas and ways to grow their business. It's also, the big publishing houses, the big manufacturers, like Bernina and Golden Peak Media, which is where Interweave now lives, are members. So it's really everybody, and it's every kind of craft. So it's knitting and crochet, but it's also sewing and cross stitch and polymer clay and scrapbooking and jewelry and all of it. So as you can imagine, it's a really big challenge to create content and experiences and events online that serve all of those people. But I think Kristen and I, when we were discussing, should we just make a association for people in sewing? Because she had a sewing background, I had a sewing background. We could have done that.
Right.
But we really felt like all of us create things for people to express themselves creatively. That's really what we do.
I find like I see the same way because like I didn't want to do my channel just about knitting, even though predominantly I'm a knitter.
Right.
But I see so many parallels between crafters, like in all different mediums. And I think like there is more that brings us together than separates us.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. And, that being said, there are specific issues that impact different sectors differently. And that people in those sectors care passionately about in a way that people in a different sector would be like, what are you talking about? So there are specifics, and it's been a really interesting and ongoing learning curve for me to say, okay, I know about sewing and I know about the quilting cotton world and that sort of thing, but what are all the big issues in yarn? Like, what are those issues? What are the issues that weavers face? Specific, like, it's a really interesting, what are people who work with crystals and make jewelry, what are the issues that they face? And it's been very interesting. And as I said, ongoing. But I think that's what keeps me interested. I think if I had just said, we're just going to work on sewing, by this point, I would have been bored. So,
well, let's talk about how you changed as a person, as a businesswoman, from that first opening Etsy to now, where you just can't help it, but you have to delegate, because it's difficult to delegate different things to other people.
Yeah. Oh, totally. It's really difficult. And I didn't have management training or anything. I was a teacher. So yeah, you don't really, you're by yourself. When you're a teacher, the bell rings and you're by yourself. You close the door and you have 25 kids or whatever, and that's what you do. So it was a lot to learn. It's still a lot to learn. But yes, now I have a team. So I have 2 employees who each work half time. So it's like 10 hours a week for each of them. But they are employees, and then I'm the only full-time employee. And I should say Kristen left the business in 2019 in May, and I bought out her share of the business. So that was an interesting process too, that I didn't know anything about, sort of buying out a 50% share. But anyway, and then I have a bunch of contractors who help as well, in like community management, and graphic design, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I have different contractors who do different consulting and work like that. So yeah, it's been good. But one thing I will say is I am not really, really good at everything that's required in a business, for sure. I mean, even let's just talk graphic design. I'm a terrible graphic designer. I don't want to learn. It's not just like I like don't want to know how to do this. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also like you have limited amount of time in your days.
Yeah.
So like if you want to learn everything, then you just
I don't even have Photoshop on my computer. Like I just don't want to.
Right.
So I know what I like. And if somebody comes to me and is like A or B, I'd be like B, I get it, but I don't want to make A and B. So I'm very happy to outsource that. Same thing with accounting. Like I'm really not a math student. So ask my kids, because they are always laughing at me. But I'm very happy to outsource bookkeeping to someone who's an expert, a lot of different things like that. And now with Craft Industry Alliance, Stephanie Alford works with us in sales. I am not really an extrovert at all. And I like talking to people, but I also really like not talking to people. And Stephanie is awesome at talking to people. So she, is happy to get on the phone with people and talk to them about what we do and what the benefits are and all of those things. And she hosts our new member meetups, and she's just amazing at that kind of thing. So I'm very happy to delegate.
Let's talk about what benefits the members get from being members of Craft Industry Alliance.
Yeah. I mean, the first piece for me that I find to be really important is news coverage. Because as you know, Yarn Market News is no more. And we really didn't have a B2B news outlet for craft, and really needed one. Most industries have one. I remember when we were planning Craft Industry Alliance, we talked to somebody who ran a trade association for the lingerie industry, for example. They have more than one B2B news outlet in lingerie. So we really deserved a really good news outlet. And so we have a big pool of freelancers, and we pay writers who are journalists to write articles that cover the industry. And I also I like to write and like to do journalism. So I also write for that as well. So covering mergers, acquisitions, trends, new hires, what is happening is really important to us. And I think it's a reason people come to us to be first and to be accurate. So that's a big piece of it, is news coverage. Another piece is networking. So being able to meet one another, whether you are in marketing at one of the big companies or you're, a YouTuber, being able to meet each other is really important. And so we host a lot of different networking opportunities, both virtually as well as at the trade show, which we'll talk about. So networking is a second piece. And then the third piece is professional education. So I come from an education background. So did Kristen. She was also a middle school teacher. So education is really important to us. And being able to get ongoing professional development when you're self-employed, for example, is really important. And something that's easy to sort of ignore, but is great. So what I aim to do is hire the best people who know the most about very particular topics that are relevant to all of us, and have them teach us about them. And so professional development is a big piece of it. And then there's other stuff. There's member discounts, there's mastermind groups, and a whole bunch of other things like that. But those are the main sort of three. It's like a three-legged stool of news, networking, and professional development.
Is it cost prohibitive to be a member of Craft Industry Alliance?
So for a long time, it was really, really cheap. It is still very affordable. And no, I would say, it's just over $100 for a year membership if you're an individual member, and that hopefully is affordable for most people who are in business and have some money coming in to invest in their own growth. So that's our hope. It is tiered. So if you're a very large business, it's closer to the $1,000 range, but it sort of depends on your annual gross revenue.
Right. Well, let's talk about H&H because that's where we've met. So what does that show mean to your company?
A lot, over the years that I've been involved with Craft Industry Alliance, people have come to me and said, oh, we should do an event. We should get together in person. And I was open to that idea, but really none of the ideas were perfect for us. We did do one in-person event before COVID in New York in collaboration with Lisa Chamoff from India Untangled. And that was fun. It was kind of a taste. But it needed to be, if we were going to do an event, it needed to be B2B because we're a B2B organization. So it couldn't be a consumer show. It needed to be something that was going to be B2B. And talk about delegating. Planning events is not in my wheelhouse at all. I can't even plan a party. Like, I don't even like going to parties. So I'm like, this is not something I can do. I don't want to do this. But so when H&H Cologne, I had known Darren Stern from H&H Cologne because he and I had collaborated on helping some of our members go to Cologne. And so he and I, had been in conversation in the past. And so they wanted to enter the American market. And one of the wonderful things about Cologne Messe, which is their parent company, is they're very collaborative. They really want to reach out to all different contributing organizations to be sort of participants. And it's a breath of fresh air. I love that about them. And so they came to us and said, would you be our strategic partner to help to bring the show to the American market? And I thought about it, I definitely did have to think. I knew it was going to be work. So it was like, okay, do we have the bandwidth to do this? Right. But it's perfect because it's a really beautiful, reputable show. They've been in business for 100 years. They have 80 shows all over the world in all different sectors. So they're the experts. They know what they're doing. And they take on all the risk. They rent the convention center and pay for all of that. I mean, it's really a big effort to put a show on like this. It's a lot. And I don't have to do any of that. So I was like, okay, that's perfect. It's B2B, which is great. And they said, you can plan all the education that happens. And that's totally in my wheelhouse. I've been booking these experts for years and feel like I can understand well what it is people want to learn and who's best to teach it. So we do the education, which is like, the keynote speakers, the panel discussions, the business classes, the master classes. And then we help market the show. So we have our newsletter audience, our membership gets free tickets. And we help to market it as well to exhibitors to come, you get a discount on exhibiting if you're a member. So basically we were a trade association without a show.
Right.
And now we're a trade association that's sort of collaborating with a show. And it's a great show. So for us, it's been fabulous. And now we have a member dinner at the show. So we have a way for all of our members who come to Chicago to be together in the same room to make those in-person connections and networking. And it's been really additive and wonderful for us. So we feel very lucky.
Well, tell me how your life personally changed from sitting home with this one kid and making a bunny while she was napping.
Yeah. Oh, it's changed a ton personally. I had 2 more kids. So my kids are now all teenagers. They're 19, 17, and 13, which is crazy. But as kids get older, they get more independent and they can drive and they go to college and all of that stuff. So it gave me, as time went by, more and more time to work, which has been great because this kind of work you can pick up and put down. You can do it in the evening. And so that's been, it's been a really good lifestyle business for me that's grown with me as my kids have grown. So that's been awesome. And I can now go to a conference, which I couldn't do for a long time. Or, come over visit you at your house, which is lovely. And I couldn't do for a long time too. So it has definitely grown. And now, Craft Industry Alliance is my full-time job. And it's all virtual, but it's a big job. And when you own your own business, as you know, like it never ends. There's always something happening that you could be reacting to. And so but it's a really satisfying and interesting business. So it kind of grew into a new career.
I find it ironic because when people think about self-employed businesses, they're like, well, you can take vacation, you can do whatever, you can go, take your time. And in reality, you just work 24/7.
It is hard, and I think too, when you have a business that you created while you were raising children, the way that I worked at was they would nap and I would work, and then they would go to bed and I would work. And so I really became used to, it's 8:00, open the computer. Now it's time to sit down and work. And it has taken a long time. And I will say it's still not quite there where you say, no, 8:00, close the computer. We don't work at 8:00 because normal people work during the day, not at night. So, I mean, it's still not there, but for sure, like if I go on vacation, I have an amazing team and they can do basically everything, but I still write the newsletter. And so, my husband knows, like, if it's Tuesday, we have to be back in the hotel. She needs 3 hours. So it's the way it is, and it's fine with me. But, sometimes it would be nice to escape from it, but it's okay.
Well, when you look back at your oldest journey, right, you probably couldn't imagine yourself doing what you're doing now. Do you have a vision for this business, like where it's going to be 5 years from now?
Good question. I definitely couldn't have imagined being here when I was in ed school, getting my degree. Like, who even knew the internet was going to be a thing? It was just impossible to imagine. So I do feel like so blessed that I was able to sort of, get into it early and all of that. I do plan to continue doing what I'm doing now. It's hard to say. I'd like it to grow. I'd like to be able to hire more people to do different things that I have in mind. And I'd like to, serve more of some of the sectors that we serve less of now. Like, we don't serve as many people in jewelry and scrapbooking and that sort of thing as we could in polymer clay, just because it takes so long to build the network and relationships and knowledge about all of these different areas. So I would like to build that as we build H&H to include all of that as well. So kind of grow together with the show. I find it endlessly interesting. I always say that every social, political issue happening in the world is also happening in craft. So there's endless things to talk about and think about and fascinating people to talk to. So at the same time, I do still work from home and it can be isolating. My team is all virtual. One of my employees is in Pennsylvania, one is in Colorado. I mean, nobody's near me. Right. So I make it a priority to go to the gym every day. So I see my friends at the gym, which is really important to me. And I'm also volunteering as a ESL tutor in my community and getting my certification through UMass to become a teacher of people who are learning English. So that at least maybe one day a week or part of the day of a week, I'm out of my house and doing something completely different. And that has really helped me a lot psychologically to feel like I can have colleagues and I can get back to what my actual training was in, which is education. And I still really enjoy that. And really am helping people in a much more sort of direct way where I'm getting the feedback right there. So I think having that balance and sort of serving, our community is really important to me. So yeah. So,
well, when you think about balance, do you still have time to write those patterns, to sew toys, to do something that brings you joy crafting?
So I still craft. I don't write patterns. And I don't really sew stuffed animals, but I craft all the time. Right now I'm making, there's a craft kit called Hello Bargello, and I'm making a tissue box cover. It is almost finished. I was just looking at it this morning. So I'm still crafting all the time. Most evenings, every weekend, making different things. I don't share it online. My relationship with social media has changed a lot. So I don't, I just don't share. I don't share it. I made my Instagram private. And I definitely sort of, as a human, receded when it comes to an online presence, which makes me happy. So,
well, the fact that there are so many different types of craft that are members of Craft Industry Alliance, does that make you personally want to try them all?
No, definitely not. There's some things I know that I don't like, or I'm not very good at, or, I've tried, but I will say I've been taking some classes recently. I just took a basket weaving class at the Elliott School of Craft in Boston. It was awesome. It was like a 7-hour class. We wove a bushel basket. It's huge. I'd never worked with like wicker before. This is completely new to me. So that was great. And then I'm taking a glass fusing class at the Center for Arts in Newton. Mm-hmm. We're gonna make Seder plates out of glass. I've never worked in glass. So I've been trying to sign up for some things like that. I'm going to go to the Madeline Island School of the Arts this summer for a week-long workshop with Denise Schmidt, who's a quilter. I'm not a great quilter, but she has assured me it's okay. so I am trying to sort of, get back to the things about craft that I really enjoyed before it was a business. And, I just love to make things. So I can't really erase it. It's always going to have to happen. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited to see you at H&H there and see you in action.
Yeah, you too. You're going to be doing some interviewing too, so I'm excited.
It's going to be my first big interview on the main stage there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, I love that there's a main stage right on the show floor, so that's really lovely. And H&H is great. I hope everybody listening will come, and if not this year, sometime in the future. It's really a great experience.
Yeah, I feel like for my channel and me personally, it was really life-changing because of the networking there. Yeah. Like I've met so many amazing crafters and yarn dyers and store owners. And
oh my gosh, absolutely. And there's just nothing like meeting in person, like the relationship that you form just even from like talking to somebody in person for half an hour. It's so lasting and so much deeper. It's really, really important. So if you can make it happen, make it happen.
Go, bitch.
Exactly. Go.
Well, thank you so much, Abby. Thank you for being a guest of my channel. I'm sure we're going to see each other from now on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.